I used to believe loyalty mattered in the corporate world. That if you worked hard, really hard, someone would notice. Someone would care. My name is Ava Mercer, 32 years old, marketing strategist at a tech corporation that likes to call itself a family. Families don't stab you in the back and expect you to say thank you. But I didn't know that yet. Back then, I still thought I was building something, a future, a name, a life that wouldn't crumble at the first gust of wind. And every morning, I woke up before sunrise, brewed my cheap coffee, and rode the crowded train downtown, clutching a laptop that held every idea I thought would take me somewhere. I sat in the same corner desk, next to the same lazy coworkers, watched by the same cold management who only looked my way when they needed something complicated solved fast and flawlessly, which I always did. There was one person who noticed, or pretended to notice, my boss, Ethan Cole, a man who knew how to smile without ever feeling a single emotion behind it. 6 feet of polished ambition, brown hair always perfectly in place, Rolex flashing like a warning sign, charm that dissolved the second you said no. He told me I was his secret weapon. He told me I'd go far if I stayed loyal, and like a fool I believed every word. Each time I fixed a client disaster or rescued a failing campaign, Ethan took the credit. He'd clap me on the shoulder, whisper, "We make a great team," and then walk into meetings where he presented my work like it appeared out of thin air. Everyone applauded him, but I stayed silent. I convinced myself my turn would come. What a pretty lie. The real problem, the one that would destroy everything, arrived wrapped in diamonds and venom. Camilla Hart, the new hire, head of strategic innovation, a title that meant nothing except she's important because someone rich wants her to be. The CEO's niece. She didn't need to work, she just needed a job that made her look powerful on Instagram. And Ethan, well, Ethan was suddenly very interested in making her look good. He introduced her to the team with a hungry grin. "Camilla will be leading all major initiative projects moving forward," he said. Major initiative projects. Projects I had been leading. I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me, but I smiled. I clapped. I said, "Welcome." And Camilla barely looked at me. She had designer heels that probably cost more than my rent. She wore arrogance like jewelry. She laughed too loudly and talked like every word she spoke was a blessing from the gods. But the worst part? She had no idea what she was doing. We were preparing for the biggest product launch of the year, a campaign I had spent months building from scratch. The strategy, the messaging, the visuals, every idea, mine. And Ethan handed it all to her like a shiny gift. "She'll take the lead on the final presentation," he said. No explanation, no credit, just a decision. I swallowed the burn in my throat and told myself it was just a test. If I helped her succeed, Ethan would remember. He'd reward my loyalty. So I coached her. I rewrote her sloppy emails. I rebuilt the pitch deck 3 times because she kept accidentally deleting sections. I trained her on basic marketing concepts that a first-year intern would know. And she still acted like she was the mastermind. When the day of the presentation came, I sat in the back of the boardroom like a ghost. Camilla strutted to the front in a white blazer that gleamed under the lights, my slides behind her, my research filling every sentence she spoke. She was confident, arrogant, and completely wrong. She messed up every analytical detail. She confused key data points. She promised things the product couldn't do, and the room noticed. Executives fidgeted, brows furrowed. Whispers flickered through the air like sparks ready to ignite. Then she looked right at me, desperate. Her eyes screamed, "Help me." Ethan's eyes screamed, "Don't you dare." I sat still, hands folded, expression calm, and I watched her fail. She stumbled, voice cracking, searching for a lifeline no one would throw. By the end, the CEO's expression could have frozen fire. "So," he said finally, "whose plan was this?" Camilla's lips parted, pupils trembling. Then she whispered, "Ava's." My heart stopped. Ethan nodded once, confirming her lie. My lie. I was blindsided, betrayed, cornered with no way out. Executives stared at me like I was a fraud, confused, disappointed. The CEO leaned back, disappointment thick in his voice. I expected better. "Perhaps this role has become too demanding for you, Ava." I opened my mouth. No sound came out. I didn't defend myself, because I realized in that moment they had planned this, all of it. Every ounce of help I'd given Camilla was part of the setup, the trap, the execution. They wanted me silent, small, replaceable. And I was. That day was the first time I ever walked out of the office before sunset. The city felt unfamiliar, cold, even under bright daylight. I found a bench outside the train station and sat there, shaking, while my phone buzzed with messages from the office. "Ethan, let's discuss tomorrow. We'll sort the narrative." Sort the narrative. Code for, we'll craft a version of the truth where you're the villain. Camilla, no hard feelings, Smiley. You're an amazing mentor. I wanted to throw my phone onto the street and watch cars crush it. I didn't. Instead, I stared at my reflection in the black screen. Who was I? A woman who had spent her whole life playing by the rules and lost everything anyway. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced my tiny apartment, mind replaying every smile Ethan ever gave me, every compliment, every lie. And under the humiliation, I felt something else rising. Not hope, not fear. Revenge. A sharp, electric hunger that whispered, "You trusted the wrong people. Now make them regret underestimating you." The next morning I showed up early, earlier than usual. My badge still worked, a surprise, but not for long. I went straight to the server room. Not to destroy anything, no, not yet. I copied everything. Emails, campaign drafts, time-stamped versions of my strategy files, recordings of meetings where I presented those ideas, screenshots of Ethan praising my work moments before forwarding those files to Camilla. Digital proof of every betrayal. Then I slipped back to my desk and waited. At 9:03 a.m., Ethan approached with his concerned boss face. "Ava, let's take a walk." We stepped into the hallway. "I know yesterday was hard," he said, "but perception matters more than truth. If you own the failure, it shows strong character." I laughed, not loudly, not hysterically, just enough to make his eyes narrow. "You want me to take responsibility for something I didn't do," I said. "It would be a team-first move," he replied, "and it would reassure leadership that you're someone they can trust." Trust, that word again. He wielded it like a weapon. "No," I whispered, "I won't." His smile vanished. "You're making a mistake." I leaned in close so only he could hear me. "No, Ethan, you did." His jaw flexed, just slightly, before he turned and walked away. I knew what would happen next. Performance review. HR, termination. But what Ethan didn't know was that he had already handed me the weapon that would destroy him. When the CEO blindsided me, they expected tears. What they were going to get was war. Because loyalty is a currency, and once it's broken, there is nothing left to lose. This story isn't about how they ruined me. It's about how I ruined them. And I was just getting started. I thought humiliation would be the worst they could do to me. I was wrong. The meeting with HR came 3 days later. A small, sterile room with glass walls, so everyone outside could watch you crumble. The HR manager, a woman who pretended empathy was part of her job description, sat across from me with a folder labeled Performance Review. She didn't bother hiding the fact that she already knew the outcome. "Ava," she started, voice soft like she was eulogizing me, "there have been concerns about your ability to lead." Yesterday's presentation highlighted some gaps in alignment with leadership expectations. Gaps in alignment. Corporate poetry for, "You're not useful to us anymore." I kept my face emotionless. "So," she continued, sliding a paper across the table, "we're offering you the opportunity to resign voluntarily. You'll receive 2 weeks' pay, a clean exit, and will avoid any formal performance documentation." I stared at the paper. They wanted me to disappear quietly. They wanted to bury the truth under a mutual decision to part ways. I folded my hands in my lap, breathed once, and asked, "If I refuse?" Her plastic smile faltered. "Well, then a formal termination might be necessary." For cause. For cause. Meaning, no severance, no references. A red flag on every future job application. A threat wrapped in corporate courtesy. I picked up the paper, read none of it, and set it back down. "No," I said, "I'm not signing that." Her eyes sharpened. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be." I leaned forward, my voice steady and surprisingly calm. "Good. Because I wanted it to be hard, for them." The HR manager left the room. 2 minutes later, Ethan arrived, pretending concern. "Ava, come on," he pleaded. "Don't drag this out." I looked at him, really looked at him, and finally understood. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. This had been planned the moment Camilla walked through the door. I smiled sweetly. "Drag it out?" I whispered. "I haven't even started." For the first time since I met him, I watched arrogance drain out of his eyes. He didn't like not knowing what game I was playing. But he'd learn. They escorted me back to my desk like a criminal. My coworkers watched with sideways glances, pretending to care, but too afraid to speak. My computer access was already disabled, but they were too late. I didn't need access anymore. I packed my things slowly, deliberately, stalling, because I wanted Ethan to feel uncomfortable every second I remained. As I grabbed the last photo from my desk, my little sister and me at the beach, the anger inside me solidified into something colder. A vow. They thought firing me was the end of the story, but this was only chapter 1. I spent the next week researching, watching, building an arsenal of information. I studied the company's vulnerabilities, the projects they were desperate to launch on time, the ones that needed the marketing strategy I had created. They thought they could steal my work? Number. They borrowed it, and I would collect the debt. I worked late into the nights in my tiny apartment, creating new documents, new versions, new files labeled in neat folders. Phase 1, truth. Phase 2, exposure. Phase 3, ruin. But revenge can't live on anger alone. It needs purpose. And my purpose was crystal clear. Make Ethan and Camilla lose everything they stole from me. I learned something interesting while digging through public filings. Camilla wasn't just the CEO's niece. She was his favorite, his protege, the one he bragged about at charity events. If she fell, he'd fall with her. Delicious. The next step was to find allies, people who had also suffered under Ethan's charming tyranny. I started with Maya, a designer I used to work with. Brilliant, underpaid, always dismissed. We met in a coffee shop. She looked exhausted, like corporate life had been draining her drop by drop. "Ava? I heard what happened. Are you okay?" Okay, what a fragile word. "I will be," I said, "but I need your help." Her brow furrowed. "With what?" I pulled out my tablet and opened a folder titled Evidence. Screenshots of messages, emails, voice memos. A timeline that made their betrayal impossible to deny. Maya's eyes widened as she scrolled. "Oh my God, they set you up." "Yes," I whispered, "and they'll do the same to you, and to anyone who gets in their way." Her jaw tightened. A fire lit behind her eyes. "What do you need from me?" I smiled. "There's a brand new campaign they're launching next month." "My campaign." "I want details. Dates, assets, anything that will hurt if it vanished." Maya hesitated, only for a moment, Then she nodded. I'm in. Revenge had a heartbeat. Step by step, I built my network. Lucas, a junior accountant who hated Ethan's guts. Jasmine, a data analyst tired of being ignored in meetings. And Marcus, an IT guy with admin access and a moral compass bent by corporate hypocrisy. Every one of them had been stepped on, used, overlooked, and every one of them wanted justice. We formed a silent alliance, a quiet rebellion inside the company walls. I promised them something I wasn't sure I could deliver. We'll take them down, and we'll do it together. Meanwhile, Ethan and Camilla were drowning, and they didn't even realize it yet. The new campaign was behind schedule. Investors were pressuring leadership. The CEO demanded results, and Camilla, she was cracking. One night, Maya messaged me. She's staying late every day. Panic mode. Ethan's blaming her for delays. I stared at my phone, feeling satisfaction bloom in my chest. Part of me expected guilt, sympathy. Nothing came. They deserved every second of fear. 2 weeks after my termination, I decided it was time to escalate. I dressed professionally, the same polished, confident look I used to wear, only now it felt like armor. I walked straight into the building like I still belonged there. The security guard recognized me and waved me through. People forget that familiarity is a key. Mine still opened doors. I stepped into the heart of the corporate machine. Employees turned their heads, confused, as I strode toward the elevator, heels tapping like gunshots. When I reached the 3rd floor, I paused, savoring the moment, then walked into the bullpen like a storm in a silk blouse. Maya spotted me first. She smiled like she had been waiting for this. I didn't stop until I reached Ethan's office. He looked up, startled. Ava, what the hell are you doing here? I closed the door behind me. Calm. Dangerous. I thought we should talk, I said. Camilla rushed in seconds later, breathless. You can't be here, she snapped, trying to sound powerful but trembling slightly. I pulled out a folder thick with evidence and set it on Ethan's desk. You stole my work, I said. You sabotaged my career. But the thing about truth is, it has receipts. Ethan tried to regain control, leaning back, smirking. You think you can threaten us? I met his gaze with deadly clarity. No, I can destroy you. Camilla's face drained of color. Leave, she hissed. Now. I leaned forward, inches from her flawless foundation. You can't bully someone who has nothing left to lose. Then I turned, walked out, and left the folder behind. Not because they needed to read it, but because I wanted them to know. I wasn't hiding. I wanted them terrified. That night, I waited. And right on schedule, the panic messages began. Unknown number. What do you want, Ava? Another. Let's talk. Privately. I blocked them both. They didn't get to choose the terms anymore. With my allies feeding me intel, I pushed Phase 2 into motion. Marcus infiltrated project files and duplicated their entire campaign infrastructure, while leaving subtle, catastrophic corruptions inside. Deadlines would miss themselves. Links would break. Assets would vanish. Budgets would evaporate. We set a chaos countdown. The train was speeding toward the edge, and they were too busy arguing to notice. But revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about revelation. Truth, ripped from shadows and thrown into the light. So I prepared my final move. A presentation, the real one, with all the data, all the proof, all the lies laid bare. But not for them. Number. For the CEO. For the board. For anyone with the power to ruin Ethan and Camilla the way they tried to ruin me. Everything was ready. Almost. There was one thing left, one more card I hadn't played. The master document. The original marketing strategy, updated, perfected, in a format only I could deliver. The company needed this to survive the launch. Without it, bankruptcy wasn't just a threat, it was guaranteed. and leadership would be forced to ask one very important question. Who destroyed everything? All arrows would point to Ethan and Camilla, while I'd be the hero with the missing puzzle piece. Redemption, served with a side of vengeance. On the eve of our strike, I stood on my balcony, a cold wind brushing against my skin. I should have felt triumphant, powerful. Instead, I felt something else. Weight. Revenge is heavy. It fills every corner of your mind, leaves no room for peace. And once you start, you can't stop. Tomorrow, their empire would crack. Tomorrow, they'd feel what I felt. Tomorrow, everything would change. I closed my eyes and whispered to the dark city below. This is for everyone they broke. My phone buzzed. A message from Maya. Are you ready? I smiled. I've been ready since the day they tried to erase me. I walked into the boardroom that morning like a woman delivering a verdict. The lights were too bright. The air felt recycled and thin. A dozen faces turned toward me, some curious, some smug, some already preparing to climb on whichever side looked safer. Ethan sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes measuring me like prey that had wandered back into the den. Camilla perched beside him, lips painted an innocent red, hands clasped, like a child who'd been told not to fidget. The CEO cleared his throat and offered a cautious, Ava, thank you for coming. I didn't sit. I stood at the far end of the table, a folder in my hand, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. I placed it down slowly, the way you'd set a bomb on a table and click the timer into place. My lawyers asked me not to come in person, I said, but I wanted to be sure everyone heard this with their own ears. Murmurs chased themselves around the room. I opened the folder and slid across page after page. Evidence, dates, correlated email threads showing who uploaded what, when. Screenshots of Ethan forwarding my drafts before Camilla claimed them. Audio files where my voice explained campaign pivots. Timestamps that proved I had conceived the strategy weeks before any new lead claimed credit. Everything here is verifiable, I said. It's all on backups. Public filings. And a copy is already with the board and external counsel. Ethan's composure flickered. How did you get this? He demanded. I smiled without warmth. You think you're the only one with access to secrets? You underestimate people who care about the work they create. Camilla's face was the color of bad porcelain. You stole company files, she accused, voice high. I laughed, a small, sharp sound. The files were mine. I created them while under employment. I didn't steal anything. You did. The CEO's expression hardened. Ava, these are serious allegations. And the truth is, I said, worse for you. I walked the room through a timeline that left no room for excuses. I described the months of work I poured into the campaign. The late nights, the calls overseas, the revisions. I spoke about Ethan's applause in private and his theft in public. I played the recordings where he praised my ideas, clips he shared in confidence, now evidence in a public chorus. I showed them the altered campaign assets Marcus had flagged, corrupt links and swapped files that would cause real damage if released. The board's faces registered shock as I explained how those corruptions exposed negligence, or worse, deliberate sabotage. And the most damning part, I said, you presented my vision through a woman who didn't understand it. When she failed, you blamed me. You rewrote history. By the end of my presentation, the room smelled like something had died, the scent of corporate certainty. The CEO picked up the phone. He called legal. He called HR. The tone of the conversation changed. The deflecting politeness vanished. Suddenly, glass walls weren't enough to keep the story contained. The board wanted answers. Investors wanted reassurance. They shuffled papers, They whispered. They asked questions they hadn't asked when they praised Ethan's leadership. Camilla stood up, trembling. This is a lie. You're trying to... You put her in front of my work, I said. You let her speak for ideas she couldn't defend. You created a scapegoat. You weaponized family ties to silence a contributor. And now you watch as the consequences return to you like a boomerang. Ethan looked at me with something like rage, but beneath it was panic. He had stolen not only my work, but his reputation. He realized in that raw moment that a victim with receipts is more dangerous than an enemy with a grudge. By noon, the CEO had asked Ethan and Camilla to step into a private meeting with auditors and the board's legal counsel. I waited in the corridor like someone outside a boxing ring, palms cool, heartbeat steady. My allies spread out through the company like quiet ghosts. Jasmine monitoring analytics, Marcus ensuring the corrupt files would misbehave at just the right moment, Lucas crunching numbers that exposed embezzlement and budget lines tied to Camilla's vendor relationships. Within hours, the company felt different. Phones buzzed with frantic messages. Executives received emails linking to the evidence. Investors demanded emergency calls. Revenge is a slow, careful clock. But when it finishes, it shatters. Ethan and Camilla emerged hours later, hair disheveled, eyes hollow. The board had questions, uncomfortable ones, about oversight, nepotism, and the chain of custody for critical assets. The legal team recommended immediate suspension pending a full investigation. The CEO, his face drained of theater, nodded. You will not be in the office until this is resolved, he told them. They left like two people who'd had the floor cut from under them. Word spread faster than any corporate memo. The staff who once avoided me like a contagion now looked at me like a comet. Some smiled in secret. Some met my gaze with gratitude. A few avoided me, ashamed of their silence. I didn't gloat. There was no pleasure in watching people fall in a way that mirrored what they did to me. There was only the solid satisfaction of balance. But consequences ripple outward in ways you can't always predict. That afternoon, a low-level tabloid, one of those gossip feeds that traded in quick hits and slow morality, published a story. It smelled like revenge and sensationalism. It pushed my name into a spotlight I hadn't expected. The headline suggested a scandal, not truth. Within minutes, my phone filled with messages. Some supportive, some speculative, some cruel. Public opinion is fickle. It loves heroes one hour and tears at their reputations the next. I had to control the narrative. I called Lucas, who had friends in media. He arranged a quiet briefing with a journalist he trusted, someone who would listen to evidence instead of headlines. We met in a diner at midnight. I laid everything out. Dates, files, records, my motives. When the story published the next day, it read like a verdict. Facts interlaced with human detail. Not vindictive, not gleeful, just truth with the scars visible. The public reaction was a mix of outrage and empathy. Investors balked at uncertainty. The board ordered a deeper audit. Regulators took an interest. Ethan and Camilla were now not just internal problems, they were corporate liabilities. It was working. But even a perfect plan has loose threads. Camilla, desperate and cornered, tried one last gambit. She leaked a private message from my phone, a selective snippet that suggested I had misused company resources. It was tiny, insignificant in the grand scheme, but it gave tabloid writers the salt they craved. The smear campaign began. It was the oldest play in the book. Distract by painting the messenger as flawed. Suddenly, conversation shifted from theft to morality. People love scandal more than truth. Scandal is easier to digest. I felt the old panic creep in. For a day, My stomach dropped like a curtain falling. Then I remembered something my mother once told me. When they throw stones, pick only the ones that prove your house was built of stone. I had already built more than stones. I had built a ledger. I gathered more evidence, bank transfers, vendor contracts, emails showing preferential treatment and hush payments. I worked with legal counsel. We fortified every claim. I refused to be flattened by the cheap theatrics of the desperate. The board met again, this time with external auditors. The picture that emerged was ugly for Ethan and Camilla. Misallocated budgets, forged approvals, and a pattern of using corporate cover to funnel work to friendly vendors. The audit team found inconsistencies that could no longer be explained away. By the time the company released its statement, Ethan and Camilla were suspended indefinitely, pending criminal review. The CEO's PR carefully framed it as an internal matter under investigation, but everyone in the city read between the lines. For once, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. But the victory was not a clean thing. The company's stock dipped. Employees were anxious. Families worried. People lost faith in leadership that had always promised stability. My campaign, brilliant as it was, now had collateral damage, and I had to live with that. That night, I walked the city streets alone. Neon signs blinked like indifferent witnesses. I thought about all the pieces of my life that had been rearranged by those months of conflict. Friends lost, fear earned, sleep stolen. Revenge had given me justice, but it had also cost me a version of myself that I might never reclaim. The next morning, I received a call from Maya. "We got an offer," she said without preamble. "A competitor reached out. They want you. They heard what you did. A job. Redemption. The chance to rebuild on a different stage." I should have accepted immediately. Instead, I hesitated. Revenge can feel empowering, but power is not the same as peace. I thought about Lucas, who had been passed over for promotion so many times his name had nearly become invisible. I thought about Jasmine, who finally allowed her data to speak and watched the company listen. I thought about Marcus, who risked his career to expose corruption. We had done this together. I knew the right move. I declined the competitor's offer. For myself, and recommended Maya and Jasmine, I sent my resume into the void, and then, after a pause, deleted it. I wasn't ready to jump into another corporate hamster wheel, not yet. Instead, I used my leverage differently. I negotiated quietly with the board, a consultancy contract to help stabilize the campaign and mentor internal teams while the company rebuilt leadership. It was a way to make the company right without being trapped into forgiving them. They accepted, begrudgingly. My role was limited, but it gave me a foothold to influence change. I insisted on transparency measures, on stricter vendor audits, on protections for contributors. The board rolled their eyes, but signed the papers. Change is often slow, but it starts with one stubborn insistence. Months passed. Ethan faced internal sanctions and a possible criminal probe. Camilla disappeared into the social void reserved for nepotism gone wrong. The CEO resigned quietly with a non-disclosure and a golden parachute that left a bitter taste. The company limped forward with new leadership and a wary workforce. People reached out to me, some to apologize, some to ask for help, and some to say nothing at all. I helped where I could. I mentored. I told my story when necessary, not as a cautionary tale, but as a map. Here lie the traps. Here is the way out. Revenge had returned balance, but it did not restore innocence. One evening, as autumn leaned in, I visited the beach with my little sister. We walked along the shore, shoes in hand, letting the cold water lap at our ankles. The sky was a low, bruised color. We didn't speak much. "You look different," she said finally. "Stronger." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm just someone who learned not to be invisible." She squeezed my hand, contentment quiet and fierce. "I'm proud of you," she said. Pride is a soft armor. When I left the beach that night, I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel complete. I felt like someone who had crossed a dangerous river and had scars to prove it. The world had shifted. People had fallen. Some things were irrevocable. But something else had bloomed in the wreckage. A fierce clarity about who I would be next. Revenge had been a thunderstorm. It had struck hard and left the air smelling like electricity. When the sky cleared, I found myself standing in a different light. I had been erased once. Now I was writing the after.